Why is it that being the smartest person in the room often makes you the most unwelcome? Why is the truth, when spoken calmly, clearly, and backed by reason, met not with curiosity, but with silence, resistance, or even hostility? Because intelligence isn't just insight, it's a mirror, and most people can't stand their own reflection. Society celebrates strength, beauty, and wealth. These qualities inspire admiration. But intelligence, true, radical, unapologetic intelligence, that terrifies people because it does something no other quality does. It reveals. As Schopenhauer wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. The more aware you are, the more uncomfortable others become. They see themselves, not through your judgment, but through the depth you carry. And it threatens everything they've built their identity on." It's not personal, it's psychological. Psychologists call it the mirror effect, when your presence alone reflects back someone's insecurities. And that reflection triggers the ego's defense systems. You don't need to speak. You don't need to correct anyone. You don't even need to posture. Your silence, your restraint, your calm, that alone becomes threatening. In groups, it's worse. Research from Stanford shows that deep thinkers often provoke involuntary threat responses, even when they say nothing. Why? Because people aren't just afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of being seen as less. That's why the atmosphere shifts when you walk in. The tone changes, the jokes become sharper, the energy more reactive. You didn't attack anyone, but your presence shattered the illusion. They won't tell you what's really happening. Instead, they'll mock, dismiss, try to humble you, tell you to lighten up, but it all says one thing: you've become the mirror they can't escape. And mirrors don't get hugs. They get smashed. People say they want truth, but what they really want is comfort. The human brain wasn't built for clarity. It was built for survival. For thousands of years, fitting in with the tribe meant safety. Challenging the tribe? That meant danger, exile, even death. That ancient programming didn't disappear when civilization evolved. It adapted. It now hides behind politeness, conformity, and a culture obsessed with appearances. This is why most people avoid deep thought. Complexity demands energy. Nuance creates discomfort. Truth brings confrontation. So they scroll past it, laugh it off, or label it as negative energy. They don't reject intelligence because it's wrong. They reject it because it hurts to look at. Schopenhauer sharpened it. Using many words to express few thoughts indicates stupidity. But in today's world, it's the opposite that thrives. Empty words, endless content, performative wisdom. And the masses? They follow blindly. Because empty noise is easier than echoing silence. Look around. Who wins elections? Populists with slogans, not scholars with substance. Who tops your feed? Influencers selling lifestyle aesthetics, not thinkers offering uncomfortable truths. Social media algorithms don't reward depth, they reward dopamine. And truth doesn't sell dopamine, it sells doubt. The result? A society allergic to introspection. Intelligence becomes uncomfortable, thoughtfulness becomes threatening. And those who speak carefully, who ask hard questions, who choose honesty over harmony, those people get filtered out, labeled difficult, too intense, or arrogant. You may have felt this firsthand. You express a layered idea, and suddenly the room gets quiet. Or worse, someone cracks a joke to pull everything back to safe, shallow waters. It's not your tone, it's not your timing, it's the truth shaking their comfort. Society doesn't just tolerate stupidity, it prefers it. Because stupidity is predictable, it conforms, it agrees, it doesn't make people look inward, and comfort is king. As Nietzsche once wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. The higher your thoughts rise, the more threatening you become to those who never left the ground. But you don't need to speak in riddles to feel this. You just need to be awake. The truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs a pulse. And if you've kept yours beating in a world begging you to fall asleep, that alone makes you dangerous." Schopenhauer believed intelligence wasn't a gift. It was a curse. Not because smart people suffer more, but because they see more and can't unsee it. He believed most people live under the control of what he called the will, a primal force that drives humans to chase pleasure, comfort, and distraction. Most are ruled by it without question. They wake, work, consume, and repeat, and they feel content. They don't ask why. They don't look beyond. They obey the script and call it a life. But the intelligent person? They begin to see through the pattern. They question the chase. They notice how every goal achieved becomes just another stepping stone to the next illusion. The applause feels hollow. The ambitions feel recycled. And the world around them starts to look less like home and more like a performance. Schopenhauer saw this clearly when he wrote, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." But the deep thinker's field of vision stretches wider. And with that wider vision comes a terrible side effect: distance. You don't feel at home in the crowd anymore. The parties start to feel loud but empty. The small talk becomes unbearable. The smiles seem rehearsed. The laughter, forced. And the moments that used to distract you now leave you hollow. You're not antisocial. You're just exhausted by the superficial. You're not cold, you're observant. And yet, that clarity doesn't always empower. Sometimes it isolates. Schopenhauer's irony was brutal. The more intelligent the man, the more he suffers alone. Because when you see deeply, it becomes harder to connect casually. You can't pretend the world is fine when you see its cracks. You can't celebrate the trivial when your mind is occupied by the eternal. Most people don't avoid deep thinkers because they're unfriendly or strange. They avoid them because they make it harder to live inside the illusion. The illusion that this is everything, that it should be enough. That surface-level happiness is fulfillment. Society depends on those illusions. And when someone like you shatters them with nothing more than your presence, the world doesn't thank you, it resents you. But that resentment is proof. Proof that your vision is real, that your thoughts cut deeper than convenience allows, and that your distance is not detachment, but clarity. You were never meant to belong in a world that fears what you see. You were meant to see it anyway, and survive it with your mind intact. Socrates was executed not because he was wrong, but because he was right too early. Galileo was exiled for proving the earth wasn't the center of the universe. The church didn't thank him. They silenced him. Nietzsche died branded insane. Turing was chemically castrated. Tesla died broke. Hypatia was murdered by a mob. These weren't criminals. They were visionaries. And society didn't just misunderstand them. It feared them. Because intelligence brings disruption, and disruption threatens power. Schopenhauer compared society to a stage play. Most people are actors performing roles they never wrote, speaking lines they never questioned. But the intelligent person? They step off the stage. They notice the wires. They ask why the play exists in the first place, and that makes them dangerous. As Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." But what happens when you hit targets the world isn't ready to acknowledge? You don't get applause, you get isolation, ridicule, sometimes worse. Society doesn't fear intelligence because it's confusing. It fears intelligence because it reveals. And revelation always comes at a price. Look at history again. Socrates wasn't just asking philosophical questions. He was questioning the very foundation of Athenian values. Tesla wasn't just inventing technology. He was challenging the business models of empires. Turing didn't just break codes. He exposed the limits of both machines and men. Hypatia wasn't simply teaching math. She was empowering women in a world terrified of that power. Their fates weren't tragic coincidences. They were inevitable responses to disruptive clarity. When you challenge comfort, you trigger fear. When you defy illusion, you create enemies. And when you speak the truth too early, the world brands you a threat. That's why so many thinkers are only celebrated in hindsight. Because when they were alive, their vision threatened what people weren't ready to see. If you've been laughed at, pushed aside, or told you're too intense, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It might mean you're ahead of your time. And while being early hurts, it also means something else. You're touching the edge of what others will only begin to understand years from now. In a world that silences thinkers and quotes them later, being feared is not always a curse. Sometimes it's confirmation. The real weight of intelligence isn't just being different, it's being alone in your difference. When you crave depth, shallowness doesn't feel neutral, it feels suffocating. When you seek meaning, distractions don't amuse you, they numb you. And when you ask why, most people ask why you're being so serious. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've learned. Once your mind starts digging deeper, everything on the surface feels like noise. And in a world that thrives on surface-level everything, relationships, conversations, ambitions, that depth becomes a liability. Most people don't want meaning. They want escape. They chase entertainment that keeps them asleep, conversations that never challenge them, and routines that distract from the emptiness. But you, the deep thinker, you see the emptiness before it arrives. Schopenhauer knew that pain well. He wrote, "The person who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience." It wasn't bitterness, it was brutal awareness. The masses don't resist intelligence because they can't understand it. They resist it because it demands they evolve. And evolution is uncomfortable. The more awake you are, the more asleep everyone else seems. Their priorities feel foreign. Their joy feels forced. Their ambition feels recycled. And the weight of pretending to fit in becomes unbearable. That isolation isn't just social, it's existential. It's the kind that makes a crowded room feel hollow. The kind that turns connection into performance. The kind that makes you question whether you're broken or just awake in a world that keeps hitting snooze. But here's the shift. That burden of depth, it's not exile, it's elevation. Leonardo da Vinci dissected bodies in secret, not for fame, but for truth. Thoreau left the city not because he hated people, but because he wanted to hear himself think. Einstein solved equations walking alone, not lost, but focused. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the space where greatness breathes. And maybe that's the cost. To feel alone now so the future can quote you later. To be dismissed today and studied tomorrow. Because while the world forgets shallow thinkers quickly, it never forgets those who stared into the abyss and brought back light. You don't carry depth because it's easy. You carry it because you're built for more than the surface. And even if no one sees it now, that burden is the very proof that what you hold matters. So where does that leave you? You see through the lies, you feel the friction. You live outside the script. Does that mean you're doomed? Misunderstood forever? Unseen until you're gone? Not even close. Because once you realize that society doesn't fear you because you're flawed, but because you're awake, you become untouchable. You don't chase approval. You define value. You don't argue to be understood. You speak with clarity and let silence carry the weight. You don't beg to belong. You build your own space, and in that space you think, create, evolve, and dare the world to catch up. They will call you difficult, cold, arrogant, detached. Let them. Because behind those labels is fear. Fear of what you might expose. Fear that your stillness means judgment. Fear that your intelligence might pull back the curtain they've spent their lives hiding behind. Maya Angelou wrote, "When you know better, you do better. But when you know deeper, you don't need permission to live it. You were not made to blend in. You were made to disturb, to challenge, to confront, to awaken. Let them fear you. Let them whisper and roll their eyes. Let them question your silence and resent your insight. Let them misunderstand you entirely, because one day, long after the noise dies down, they'll look back. And they'll see that the ones they tried to ignore were the only ones telling the truth. When that day comes, you won't need recognition. You won't need applause. You'll already have built something no one could take from you. Clarity, solitude, and the strength to walk alone without ever feeling lost. The world is loud, but you are louder in your silence. The world is crowded, but you are rare in your solitude. You are not broken. You are untouchable. Type, "I see through it" in the comments if you've ever felt too deep or too different. And if you've ever been rejected for thinking deeply, share it below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. The next video is also important. much more than you imagine. Because your evolution doesn't wait, and this world needs your strength in silence. Subscribe if you're ready to go deeper with history's sharpest minds. See you in the next one.